Uh, is my screen visible, please? Hello? My screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So let me begin with explaining what climate change is and what are the real threats and opportunities which is there within it. So I have made it as simple as possible for the viewers to understand, not using any jargons or languages which we usually do, and try to explain it at a very simple way. To start with, I will come to today's. This is the image of from the the satellite of NASA. What you see is the sun, and in that square box on the right-hand corner is the Earth scale, and that dot is Earth. What you need to understand that climate change, or whatever we see is a normal and regular phenomena going through millennia, and it happens with the sun. And the sun is the principal factor by which climate change happens. This graph explains you very simply that what is climate change. You have changes in the sun's strength, which creates changes in the Earth's orbit, and it creates changes in the plate tectonics. When I say plate tectonics, we all know that there are 7 continents, and there will be change. So whenever there is a change in the sun's strength, what happens is we have this corona mass ejection. I would, in the corner, I have read the Carrington event to know more. So this is something which you can do later on. So there are magnetic events which happens around every 12,000 years, which I have put in the bottom. And these events have been happened. They have been noted, and they are scientific documents available for anybody to see. That every 12,000 years, the North Pole and the South Pole flips. So when there is a flip in the polarity, the Earth stops rotating. It goes out of the orbit. When the Earth's orbit changes, obviously there will be cataclysmic effects, and plate tectonic changes happen, and there is a problem in the climate. Now this happens as I said, regularly in about 12,000 years. At the end, you can see we are talking about Anthropocene forcings. Anthropocene is human-induced. We are creating some events which should have happened naturally over a longer period in a millennia, but these are now shortened down and happening from the time when we have started our industrial revolution. To give you the example why we need to have a reduction in the temperature, what we are talking about in Paris Agreement 1.5 degrees. To appreciate that, you have to understand that about 27,000 years ago, till about 19,000 years, it took the sun to heat up the planet by 4 degrees to get what we have today, what we know as a planet, the blue planet, with the 7 continents and the oceans. Now, from 19,000 to 2019, the temperature of the Earth increased by about 7 degrees. Now, if it increases the way it is, we are definitely going to have the fag end of ice age. Yes, we still are living in the ice age. That's why there are 2 polar ice caps, and the Andes and the Himalayas and the Alps. All that ice will melt, and we will have a watery world. So appreciation of 1 degree, which we talk about 1 and 1.5 degree, must be understood at Earth scale. This is not something which you are doing with your air conditioner in the room. So that's a huge amount of increase in temperature. But to explain better that what extreme events are, I have started with this very year, starting, and I've taken Europe. Because Europe, if you just take India scale of about 2 or 3 states, it would cover the whole area. And as you can see on the left-hand corner, you have got all the mix of weather extremes. There was flood, there was drought, there was high temperature, there was cold wave, all happening at a very small area together. We have seen enough news today of Germany flooding, Spain fire, and other things. Now, if you would look at the right-hand corner, the United Nations disaster risk, it shows how the comparison from 1980 to 1999, there were reported disasters were about 4,000, but then there is simply an increase to that in 2000 to 2019, about 7,000 plus. Total deaths have increased, total affected people have increased, and total loss in economy has also increased. So, what are the major factors which is creating these increase in losses and disasters? First comes the flood, then comes the cyclones or the storms, then comes your earthquake, then comes your increase in temperature, then you're looking at landslides, then you're looking at drought, then you're looking at forest fires, and volcanoes, which was one of the major events earlier, has come down to about a very small percentage. And then finally are the land mass movements. Now, when we talk about land mass movement, though it is very small, it has a very significant impact that when Antarctic shelf, which you have heard, has broken and it's floating out, there are pathogens which are trapped there for last 50, 55,000 years, and they would melt and come out into the water, and we really don't know what they would do. With one single pathogen of SARS-CoV-2, we can see what happens to the Earth. If you are looking at pathogens which were hidden for last 50,000 years, what can happen is not understood yet. This is a snapshot as of today, and as you can see, there's a red alert of tropical cyclone on 11th of October 2021, and this snapshot is of a whole 1 year. There have been 72 events between 12th October 2020 to 11th October 2021, and 19 of them were red alerts. So the Earth is really boiling with cyclones, floods, earthquakes, volcanoes all around, and every continent is getting affected. This is the latest report which Ratanji spoke about, where we are talking about climate change, the 6th assessment report from the IPCC, which has been released before the COP26, which will happen in Belfast in UK. And I have taken one of the fact sheets which talks about urban areas, and urban areas are in a serious danger where we need to have a look at what is going to happen, because our economy and most of the people today are living in urban areas. So what would happen? This is the WHO screenshot graphic where you can see that by 2030, there is an expectation of about 250,000 deaths from diseases. There is going to be about 7 million deaths because of air pollution. There's going to be a cost of about $2 to $4 billion in losses. And there's going to be hunger, famine, and vector-borne diseases like malaria and dengue and other viruses. And I don't have to talk about other viruses anymore as the temperature rises. So we are not supposed to go further in temperature rise because these will keep on happening. Now, what of India? Now, if you look at India, in the last 20 years, 80 billion in absolute economic loss due to disasters has happened in the last 20 years. The annual human lives which we have lost in floods alone is about 1,600. But properties more than 1,800 crores per year has been lost. The Indian subcontinent, when you look at the IPCC report, has been reported as to be moderate to extreme climate change vulnerability, and Mumbai and Kolkata lead that. And the 6 major climate change related risks which India would be facing is high temperature, followed by extreme floods, that is precipitation, followed by drought and soil fertility loss, then flooding and extreme rainfall, cyclones, storm surges, sea level rise, and the linked health risks with it. So look at the graph here. Again, the graph shows that yes, we are looking at 50-degree temperatures. They are becoming normal. The mean temperature is shifting from 45 degrees summers to 48 degrees summers. This is already, we are having a record of 54% of Indian groundwater are nearly depleting. And by the scenario between 2021 to 2050 shows a lot of desertification of various states, which is going to further exacerbate the economic situation and the social situation of India. To explain that whether we are really having climate change to any more doubters, is that let us look at just 3 years between now and the past 3 years. So you would see on June 2019, we had a loss and damage of 1.4 billion. Saurashtra Peninsula was hit by Cyclone Vayu. Then we had on the East Coast, we had a loss of 8.1 billion with Cyclone Fani hitting Odisha, Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, and East India. Then we look at 2020, we again see a 665 million Maharashtra. We look at 13.5 billion West Bengal, Odisha, and Andaman Islands with Amphan. And then again, we look at this year. This year again, the intensity is increased, the cities and towns and areas impacted increase, the costs increase. So this is something which was predicted by the IPCC long back, and this is already happening. And when you look at it from the economic standpoint of view, from the risk standpoint of view, about 171 million people live in coastal areas. We are talking about 13 major ports, 174 minor ports. We as India, as a cusp of rising, are looking at creating CZs or coastal economic zones. So when we are looking at coastal economic zones, think of this impacts of climate change. And if you look at within 500 meters, there are settlements. which is about 1,262 settlements are within 500 meters of the coast. Bombay High and other such structures. There are about 1,023 ports which are existing. There are about 143 ports. Within 10 kilometers, we have power plants which are 27, and there are proposed power plants are 59. Now, if we already know what is the coal crisis. Now, if our power plants are going to go away, we have a health, not only we will have economic risks, but also security risks are going to come back. Now, what is about Mumbai? This is something which Rajan Chadaji again explained. So, when we look at Mumbai 2030, that's the map of in yellow. It becomes a little more orange by 2050 and dark red by 2070. That is when we are talking about heat wave, and heat wave immediately follows flood. When your earth is caked, it becomes like a Mitika ghada. So water will not populate, but it will just run off. And as the surface runoffs are there are going to be floods. And district-wise, we can see floods, and it will be followed by drought because the water has not gone inside. Now look at the Mumbai zone. This is what we are talking about, the flood zone for Mumbai, which is going to increase because of sea level rise. When I talk about sea level rise, it is not that the water is going to increase. It is just like in Denmark, the level of the sea, the mean tide level will be higher than that of the land, as in Denmark also. And so when there is rain, we will need artificial pumping for the water to be thrown out, and therefore these are flood risks. And if you would look at, I found up to 2016, that how we have not planned ourselves that urban sprawl is continuously growing. So the impact on the urban sprawl will be enormous. Economic loss, therefore, and life loss, therefore, are going to be more. A simulation was done. This is open source on how and what can happen if Mumbai, if a cyclone, any of these three cyclones which I showed you had turned and entered Mumbai, and simulation took into account the 2005 flooding. And when you take the 2005 flooding and superimpose it on the sea level storm surges that could happen, flooding from 1 meter to more than 9 meters is a risk which is being found over Mumbai MMR region. So this is something which needs to be thought. Now there are opportunities and there are solutions. So almost all these industries which you see on the left-hand side are ones which will be impacted. And as they will be impacted, there can be consultants who have knowledge who can incorporate the climate science to provide a solution, not only for the new ones, but for the retrofit projects that can create the difference between losses and continued existence of such entities. This is very important for people to understand that there are opportunities, and it's not something which are talking about fear-mongering. Knowing about it can help you to mitigate them and adapt to it. So currently, not many investors and lenders and insurance have a clear view of which companies will endure or even flourish in the environmental changes. And this is throughout the world. Munich Re, Swiss Re, and Bank of London, and all they are thinking about this. And without reliable climate-related design and build information, you cannot price climate-related risks. And when catastrophe strikes, the financial well-being of the company can be impacted. The United Nations in 2018 outlook, they showed that there has been in the last 20 years 150% rise in the direct economic costs, and extreme weather event accounted for about 77% of it, which is about 2.2 trillion. So, and then when you look at the impact, insured losses were only 85.7 billion, but insurable losses were 181 billion. Who actually insures your phone and your mobile and your sunglasses and other things? But they also get damaged, and they are also completely clear price. So that is why something we call CCaSS, that is climate change, which can be measured as a sustainability service, needs to be taken care of. This can be done by risk quantification, quantitative predictive models, geographical information system, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things. So CCaSS is something which can actually bring about, create something, tell you what are the losses which you have to accept, because there will be losses, and what are the problems which can be adapted, and the risk can be reduced and mitigated. This is a process of CCaSS where one can, those who understand, they can explore the hazard, that what is the kind of climate hazard which will be impacted to your businesses, even if it is a greenfield or even brownfield or existing. Then you understand the vulnerability. What is the vulnerability you have? You investigate options to stop it. You prioritize what is the option, because there will be legacy issues. You cannot just immediately change things, but you know what you can do. And then you can take options, because some as financial institutions are now getting more geared, they are ready to invest in climate change and green technology and so forth. And accuracy of assessments, companies like which are in Paris and all people with whom I work, they can do it at a regional scale, that's a macro scale, 100 kilometer by 100 kilometer square, and they can even come down to a mini scale, that is 100 meter by 100 meter. आपके छत के ऊपर कितना बारिश गिरेगा, आपके कंपाउंड में क्या फ्लड होगा कि नहीं, ये आपको जरूरी है जानने के लिए, नॉट कि सारे मुंबई में कहाँ क्या होने वाला है. So that is very important, and this can be done for 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, or 75 years into the future. And also a continuous monitoring can be done. This is being done in many places, and this can be done. There are some case studies. We did this in 2019 December for Mumbai. We did a 365 days risk analysis, and that is when we saw that traditionally July is the month when we have more than 500 mm of rain, but it was showing that August will face 500 mm of rain and July will be a deficit rainfall. So when we came to July, then we could understand that in August there is going to be a high speed wind, and 3 days, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, would be extreme heavy rainfall. These are the risk days which were there. And exactly on 20th August, that is Thursday, the 6th of August, rather, in 2020, we saw this. We saw the Pedder Road, we saw the landslide, we saw the institutionals, the infrastructure, the residential, and the commercial, all got damaged. So if you have this kind of information beforehand, you know that these things can happen. You can take your supply chain management, you can take your other aspects in businesses and in anything for that matter, and be able to prevent this. The detailing of this was, as you can see, we are talking about HN hospital, we're talking about Taj. You can actually zoom in and actually tell you how much of water, how much of heat would be there. So this can be done. These are the kind of things people are trying to do today. What we should bring it earlier, it was only available to governments and large corporations, but this can be done for even an SME today, so that the supply chain management and the country becomes stronger and easier. And you just don't consider that climate change is something that is hitting somebody else, but you know what will happen and you can take the precautions. So this is essentially what we talk about, and this is all that I have to say for now. Thank you.